Picture your mind like a storm, with thoughts, fears, and doubts spinning wildly. Now imagine standing at the center of that storm, untouched, calm, and clear. This is what the Buddha discovered. Not only enlightenment, but a way out of the storm of constant thinking. We all know this feeling, lying awake, replaying conversations, worrying about what's ahead, and judging ourselves for the past. Overthinking is so common that we forget peace is possible. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha noticed this pattern in the human mind. He saw that our suffering is not caused by life itself, but by how tightly we cling to our thoughts. In this video, we will explore the Buddha's wisdom on overthinking, what he truly meant by letting go, how to find stillness in daily chaos, and why peace does not come from fixing every problem, but from changing how we relate to the mind. Stay until the end, and you will discover not just ancient teachings, but a path back to your own inner silence. 1. The nature of the mind. The Buddha once described the mind as restless, unsettled, and difficult to guide. He compared it to a monkey, always jumping from branch to branch, never staying in one place. This description fits closely with what we now call overthinking. When thoughts keep jumping, we lose our ability to focus. We worry about what hasn't happened, replay what already has, and imagine endless situations that may never occur. The Buddha called this kind of mind a source of dukkha, or suffering. He taught that suffering does not come from the world itself, but from how we respond to it, and that response is shaped by the thoughts we hold on to. An untrained mind turns into a factory of fears, false ideas, desires, and expectations. Overthinking begins when we cling too tightly to thoughts. We believe every idea, fear, or possibility that appears in the mind. We think, if I don't keep thinking about this, something bad will happen, or I must find the perfect answer before I act. But the Buddha taught that holding on to thoughts is like trying to keep water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Through meditation, the Buddha saw that the mind can be trained. He realized that beneath all the noise, there is a natural awareness, still, calm, and untouched. This understanding was at the heart of his enlightenment. To overcome overthinking, we must first understand that we're not our thoughts. They are like clouds passing through the sky. Some are light and gentle, others dark and stormy. But the sky, our awareness, remains untouched. 2. The Four Noble Truths and Overthinking. To truly understand what the Buddha might say about overthinking, we need to return to the very foundation of his teachings, the Four Noble Truths. These truths are not abstract philosophy. They are tools, practical insights designed to help us end suffering and cultivate inner peace. Let's explore how each truth directly relates to the problem of overthinking. 1. The truth of suffering, dukkha. Overthinking is at its core a form of dukkha, a Sanskrit word often translated as suffering, but which also means unease, stress, or dissatisfaction. When we overthink, we suffer twice, first from the situation itself, and then from our thoughts about it. The mind loops through endless what-ifs and should-haves. It creates scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen, yet the body responds with real anxiety and tension. The Buddha taught that this mental agitation is a universal part of human life. Even in stillness, the untrained mind churns with restlessness. Overthinking might wear the mask of intelligence or responsibility, but underneath it is usually fear, control, or unresolved pain. 2. The origin of suffering. The second noble truth identifies the cause of our suffering, craving, clinging, and attachment. When we overthink, what exactly are we attached to? We may be attached to certainty, wanting to predict and control every outcome. We may be attached to identity, replaying past mistakes to reinforce a story about who we are. We may be attached to perfection, mentally editing conversations, decisions, and actions until they feel just right. The Buddha observed that this grasping, this inner tightness, is what turns natural thought into mental imprisonment. It's not the thinking itself that's the problem, but the way we cling to our thoughts and demand they bring us peace. In overthinking, we are often chasing clarity but getting confusion. The harder we try to mentally solve the situation, the more tangled the mind becomes, and this endless mental motion is a direct symptom of craving. 3. The cessation of suffering. But the Buddha didn't stop at identifying the problem. He offered hope, the third noble truth, that the end of suffering is possible. This includes the end of compulsive overthinking. How? By letting go. Not through force or suppression, but through understanding. When we see clearly that overthinking doesn't bring us peace, we begin to release our attachment to it. We recognize that thoughts are not truth. They are mental events arising, passing, not self. When we stop feeding our thoughts with attention, they lose power. The mind doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be freed, and in that freedom, silence becomes more natural than noise. 4. The path to cessation, the Eightfold Path. The Buddha outlined a practical method for calming the mind and ending suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. This isn't a checklist, but a way of life, a training of the heart and mind. Right view. Understand that thoughts are just thoughts. They are not facts. Much of overthinking is based on illusion, fears about the future, guilt about the past, assumptions about others. When we see their impermanence, we stop believing every thought we think. Right intention. Instead of fueling fear or control, we set intentions of renunciation, kindness, and peace. We learn to choose which thoughts to follow and which to let pass like clouds in the sky. Right speech, action, and livelihood. These are ethical practices that create harmony in our outer life, reducing the inner friction that fuels overthinking. When we live in integrity, the mind is naturally quieter. Right effort. We gently steer the mind away from destructive patterns and toward beneficial ones, not through force, but through practice. Right mindfulness. This is the key. We observe our thoughts without judgment, watching them come and go. This awareness creates space, and in that space, the compulsion to overthink softens. Right concentration. Through meditation, the scattered mind becomes steady. When we learn to focus the mind on a single object like the breath, we weaken the habit of mental wandering. In this way, overthinking is not merely a psychological issue, it is a spiritual one. It arises from the same ignorance and craving that the Buddha saw as the root of all suffering. And just like any other form of suffering, it can be transformed, not by resisting it, but by meeting it with wisdom, presence, and compassion. When we walk the path the Buddha laid out, the mind doesn't just get quieter, it becomes free. 3. Mindfulness and present moment awareness. One of the Buddha's greatest teachings is sati, mindfulness. It is the practice of being fully present in the here and now. Overthinking thrives in the past and future. It replays old events, imagines worst-case scenarios, and builds castles in the air. But mindfulness brings us back to the only place life truly happens, this moment. When we are mindful, we become aware of our thoughts without getting caught in them. We see them arise, stay for a while and pass away. Just as a fire burns only when fed, overthinking continues only when we fuel it with attention and belief. The Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." This teaching, though simple, is revolutionary. In a world of distractions, learning to stay present is an act of liberation. In mindfulness meditation, we observe the breath. Why the breath? Because it is always now. Each inhale and exhale grounds us in the present. When overthinking arises during meditation, we don't fight it. We acknowledge it, thinking, and gently return to the breath. This process teaches the mind to loosen its grip on thoughts. Over time, the space between thoughts increases. The mind becomes less reactive and more peaceful. We no longer chase every idea or fear. We see them as temporary visitors, not truths. Mindfulness can be practiced outside of meditation too. Washing dishes, walking, eating, all become opportunities to anchor ourselves in the now. 4. Letting go. Letting go is at the heart of Buddhist practice. The Buddha didn't tell us to suppress thoughts or feelings. He taught us to release our attachment to them. Overthinking is a form of attachment. We grasp at understanding, control, and certainty. But life is uncertain. Trying to mentally solve everything is like trying to hold back the ocean with a broom. The Buddha said, "You only lose what you cling to." Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means surrendering the illusion that we can think our way out of suffering. So, how do we let go? 1. Awareness. The first step is simple but powerful. Recognize when overthinking is happening. You can't release what you're not aware of. Pause. Notice the mental noise. Acknowledge, I'm caught in thought. This awareness creates a gap, a space where freedom becomes possible. 2. Acceptance. Next, meet your overthinking with kindness. Don't criticize yourself or try to force the thoughts away. The Buddha emphasized compassion as the foundation of the spiritual path. Overthinking is not a personal failure. It's a human habit. Welcome your experience with a soft heart. 3. Release. Here's where the letting go begins. Imagine placing each thought on a leaf and watching it float down a gentle stream. Or label the thought softly. Worry, planning, fear, memory. This labeling helps you separate from identification. You are not the thought. You are the awareness, watching it arise and pass. 4. Return. Each time you release a thought, gently return to the present. Feel the breath, notice the body, hear the sounds around you. The present moment is always here, patiently waiting to receive you. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a practice, repeated moment by moment. Some thoughts will return, and that's okay. What matters is your willingness to return again and again with patience and grace. Over time, this practice rewires the mind. You begin to trust the silence more than the noise. You stop needing every answer, every certainty. You realize peace was never at the end of a thought. It was here all along, just beneath the grasping. Letting go does not make life empty. It makes life spacious. And in that space, the mind finds what it was searching for all along. Freedom. 5. A practical daily practice. Here's a simple daily routine to overcome overthinking using Buddhist principles. Morning, 5 to 10 minutes. Sit in silence. Focus on the breath. Set an intention. Today I will observe my thoughts, not become them. Throughout the day, practice mindful pauses. Before reacting, take one breath. Label thoughts silently. Thinking, judging, fearing. Evening, 10 minutes. Reflect. Did I overthink today? When? Why? What can I release? End with a short, loving kindness meditation. May I be peaceful. May I be free from mental suffering. 6. The role of compassion in healing the mind. Overthinking is rarely neutral. It often arrives with an inner storm, a cycle of judgment, worry, and self-blame. We criticize ourselves for thinking too much, for not being calm, for not having all the answers. And in doing so, we add an extra layer of suffering to an already restless mind. But the Buddha taught a different approach. one that begins not with control, but with compassion. He often spoke of metta, loving kindness, as a direct antidote to suffering. Just as a mother holds her child with warmth and care, we are invited to turn that same gentle attention inward. When we catch ourselves overthinking, the healing response is not, "What's wrong with me?" but, "It's okay. I'm here. I'm doing my best." This small shift makes a profound difference. In metta meditation, we repeat phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be safe, may I be free from mental suffering." At first it may feel mechanical, but with time, these words begin to soften the harsh edges of the mind. We begin to notice the voice of inner criticism and respond not with more judgment, but with understanding. Compassion does not eliminate thoughts. It transforms our relationship with them. Instead of trying to fix, control, or banish what arises in the mind, we learn to hold it all with gentleness. We say, "Even this too belongs." And as our compassion deepens, it naturally extends outward. We begin to offer the same kindness to others, especially those who trigger our worry or frustration. Overthinking often revolves around imagined conversations, past conflicts, or fear of judgment. When we meet these thoughts with compassion toward ourselves and others, their power fades. Compassion brings space. It creates room for healing, for breathing, for release. It helps us see that we are not broken, only human, that we are not alone in our struggles with the mind. When thoughts race, compassion is not a weakness, it is a brave choice. Overthinking loosens its hold, not when we fight it, but when we care for it. And in that care, the mind slowly begins to heal. 7. Detachment and the illusion of control. At the core of overthinking is a quiet but powerful craving, the need for control. We analyze conversations, rehearse the future, and replay the past, all to predict, prevent, or perfect what comes next. But the Buddha saw clearly through this illusion. He taught that the more tightly we cling to control, the more we suffer. Why? Because life itself is uncertain. Everything is always changing: relationships, health, emotions, success, and failure. The Buddha called this impermanence. Yet the overthinking mind resists this truth. It believes, if I think enough, I can make things safe, certain, and stable. But this only leads to mental fatigue. Instead of control, the Buddha offered something far more freeing: detachment. This word is often misunderstood. Detachment does not mean indifference or emotional coldness. It means freedom, the ability to take part in life fully without being trapped by outcomes. Detachment means we can care deeply, do our best, and still let go of the results. It is the mindset of the wise. I plant the seed, I water it, but I do not fixate on the harvest. When we cling to a specific outcome, the mind tightens. Every uncertainty starts to feel like a danger. When we choose detachment, the breath softens. We accept that we cannot control the waves of life, but we can learn to move with them gracefully. In Buddhism, this is closely linked to equanimity, a calm and balanced mind in the face of change. It is a quiet confidence that says, whatever comes, I will meet it with awareness. Think of your thoughts like tabs open in a web browser. Overthinking opens many tabs, trying to solve problems ahead of time, but none of them fully load. Detachment is like clicking close all tabs and returning to the home page, this moment. Or imagine holding a bird. If you grip too tightly, you hurt it. If you hold too loosely, it flies away. Detachment is the gentle hold, present, caring but not clinging. Overthinking loses its power when we realize we were never meant to control everything. We were meant to show up, stay present, and trust how life unfolds. Letting go of control is not weakness, it is wisdom, and in that wisdom, the mind finds peace. 8. Cultivating inner silence. Beyond all teachings, philosophies, and techniques, there is something even deeper: the stillness beneath the storm. This is not something the Buddha only spoke about. It is something he discovered through deep meditation and awakening. This is called inner silence. Inner silence is not the absence of sound, or even the total absence of thought. It is the open awareness where thoughts rise and fall like waves on an ocean that remains still. It is the calm center within chaos, the steady witness inside you that has always been present. The Buddha pointed to this silence again and again, not through loud words, but through quiet presence. He taught that to touch this silence, we must learn to stop chasing results, chasing approval, chasing answers. Instead, we turn inward. Meditation is the doorway, not a method to force thoughts away, but a practice of gentle awareness. We sit, we breathe, we notice. We return to this moment again and again, and slowly something begins to open. At first, the mind will resist. It will try to fix problems, create stories, or look for distraction. This is natural. But if we stay still, if we stay patient, a shift begins. We stop identifying with every passing thought and start noticing the space between them. The Buddha described this space as nirvana, the calming of the mental fires that create suffering, craving, aversion, and confusion. In this silence, those fires lose their strength. We find peace not by removing all thoughts, but by no longer holding on to them. This inner silence is healing. It brings clarity, balance, and deep rest. The more we sit with it, the more we see that our true nature is not the storm, but the sky behind it. In daily life, you can touch this silence in small moments: a mindful breath, a pause before you respond, a walk in nature without headphones. These are quiet doorways back to yourself. Remember, this silence is not far away. It does not need to be made. It is already here, waiting within you. Overthinking is not a modern problem. It is a timeless struggle of the human mind. But the Buddha, through deep insight and compassion, offered us the tools to understand and move beyond it. His teachings remind us that we are not our thoughts, that peace is possible, and that freedom comes not from controlling everything, but from letting go. In a world that praises busy minds and constant thinking, choosing stillness is a radical act. Choosing presence is powerful. So the next time your mind starts to race, pause. Remember the Buddha's words. Notice the thought without holding on to it. Breathe. Return to this moment. You don't need to fix everything. You only need to wake up to what is happening right now, and in that awareness, peace can meet you. Thank you for watching. If this video gave you clarity or calm, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more Buddhist wisdom.